Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Five Hole Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We're your hosts today, TJ and Zach.
Hey.
So we got kind of this left field episode that we're planning on doing. Think of it like a Tuesday Trends, but for the entire season. A bunch of players that had wild seasons. Tage Thompson, Jonathan Huberdeau. Wild in the bad way. But then there's guys like Erik Karlsson.
He was wild in the bad way.
He was. And we got like Aaron Ekblad on here, Jacob Markstrom, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Zach, you have who are your guys? I think I just went through most of my guys here.
So I got a couple of good guys, a couple of bad guys. Actually, most of my guys were all good guys, except for my boy Mackie Weegs. Mackenzie Weegar is, he was, well, there's just problems in Calgary, I guess, in general. But then I got Brandon Montour having a crazy breakout. Dougie Hamilton just playing better than I guess we all kind of expected it to. Tage Thompson and my boy, Filip Gustavsson. Love it. I'm loving it.
I feel like Weegar got better as the season went on, didn't he? He had like 12 points in his first half and then, close to 20 points to finish out. It's still half point per game. We'll get there. But how are you digging the playoffs so far? Which series has been your favorite to watch?
It's gotta be the Wild and the Stars.
Really?
I've been watching those games intently. I feel like I'm the only person that thinks that.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised when you said that.
I've loved that series. There's been, big hits, hard play. Things have been, it's not like it's been dirty play, which, I like. That's one thing, I people love and hate about the playoffs in hockey is things get a little dirty sometimes.
A little dicey.
So it's been good, hard hockey play, but not like, just people hurting each other for no reason. Behind that, it's probably got to be the Kings and the Oilers, man. Mm-hmm. That's also just been a straight up good series.
Yeah.
Like, it's back and forth. One team goes up by 3 goals, and then the other comes back and gets, it's just been
crazy. Win in overtime, yeah. That would have been my favorite series so far. I think that, and obviously the Toronto-Tampa, that just feels like a Stanley Cup in and of itself is just as competitive as the Stanley Cup final. But, there's plenty of narratives behind the Toronto team right now. They want to get past the first round, but I'm with you that, maybe not on the Wild, but the LA and Edmonton series, that one's so fun.
Have you watched any of those games? Have you watched any of the Wild Stars games?
They're good. Kaprizov's nowhere to be found. So it's just like, weird depth, and like Ryan Hartman's having a series. Like, it's just weird. It's a goalie battle. I love how Jake Ottinger's looked. He's been great. Playing Marc-Andre Fleury was a terrible decision. But it's just been a very confusing. And to be honest with you, I don't care about those teams. Like, I like the Minnesota Wild. I just don't think they're a cup contender. So I've put my attention on the other series that I feel like could wind up in the cup final.
Which is maybe one reason why I've enjoyed that series so much, because I don't really care. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm rooting for the Wild, I guess, when it comes down to it. But at the same time, you said about, the goalie battle. You guys know how I feel about Jake Ottinger. Like, I love Jake Ottinger. At the beginning of the year, I said this was going to be a big year for him, and I was, hit that nail right on the head. And Gustafsson's, he's been one of those guys all season long that I've been trying to get people to notice. And finally, people have no choice but to notice him.
Yep. And he's one of your guys that we're going to dissect today in our year-long Tuesday Trends. I didn't really come up with a good name for it, so that's what I'm just going to call it. I don't know if it's like, weird seasons, dissecting weird seasons. I don't know. But shall we kick that off?
It's the year-long check-in.
Year-long check-in. I like that. Okay, so we're Five Hole. If you guys want to find us, we're on Twitter at FHF Hockey. We got the Fantasy Hockey Discord bumping even in the off-season. Let's start off with Jonathan Huberdeau. I thought this one was going to be a little bit harder to figure out and kind of pinpoint why his season went the way that it did. But, as I did some more digging, it started to make a bit more sense. And Huberdeau might have been the biggest disappointment of the year. His ADP was just outside the first round. And when I say just outside, it was 12.1. So if you're in a 12-team league, he is just on the cusp. just on the other side. Looking at his 4 years prior, his averages in Florida, his point per game pace fell 42% from a 99-point pace average to the 57 points he put together this year, or the pace thereof. Shots on goal fell 37% to under 2 a game for the first time in a while. Average time on ice fell, and this is something that Daryl Sutter is, I guess, to blame for. Average time on ice fell 11%. Shooting percentage fell 17%. On-ice shooting percentage, a 24% margin. On-ice goals for, 25% margin. His IPP, all strengths, fell 14%. 5v5 stayed pretty constant, but his power play IPP went down 30%. He just wasn't getting in on nearly the same amount of power play points as he was. It was a 36-point power play point average from his last 4 years in Florida, down to 15 power play points this year. That's 21 points that are just missing. And that would have put him at like a 78-point pace. And that's something that we can say, is a normal Huberdeau season. His power play share fell 17%. His average in Florida was 23.6, and the team was the 5th best over the 4 years, and Calgary's was 19.8. So, still hanging out around 1 every 5. This is where where things really started to make sense. And I have one point that I think is, a bigger catalyst to his season than anything else. But let's look at this one. So you take his most common line mates in Florida and their paces. That's Barkov, Dadonov, Reinhart, and Sam Bennett. So yeah, Dadonov, we're going back. Between those 4 players, their 4-year paces averaged out is around 75 points. 2 most common defensemen he played with, their average pace is 53 points. That's Ekblad and Yandel, both 53-point paces, by the way. Then you look at Calgary. And of course, it's just 1 year, and it was a bad year for damn near everybody over there. Calgary's a 56-point pace, Lindholm's 66, Toffoli 73, and Mikael Backlund 56-point pace. So their average line mate pace is 62. So it was a 17% drop in quality of line mates. We knew that going into this. Something we talked about going into the preseason is Huberdeau, he doesn't have that offense, the offensive system. Like Florida is just run and gun, all offense, and then Daryl Sutter is trying to do this defensive whatever, and is not conducive for fantasy hockey. So that drop in line mate production, on top of the 24% drop in the shooting percentage of his ice mates, 25% drop in on-ice goals for, we're taking big chunks out of his production here. What I got behind all of this is that's what went wrong, but it's not why it went wrong. We've diagnosed, we just don't know the cause. And this is where it comes in. He played 31 games at right wing for damn near for the first time in his career. His point per game pace while he was a right wing, 40-point pace. Point per game pace while he was at left wing, over 70 points. Flames with Huberdeau at right wing, they were 15, 12, and 6. And after they moved him back to the left wing to end the year, they were 8, 3, and 2. I don't know why Daryl Sutter decided to put him on the right side. Looking at his season as a whole, did a change to a new city have a negative impact on his season? Probably. Did a change from that offensive first Florida system to a defensively responsible Calgary system have a negative effect? Probably. Did a lack of continuity in line mates that resulted in 3 different centers and a dozen different wingers, and just a straight up inability to find chemistry and build momentum with your line mates have a negative impact? Probably. Did a change to right wing have a negative impact? Definitely. And did an inability to generate offense from the slot and the center of the ice have a negative impact? Probably.
And you gotta wonder why, I agree with you, why put him on the right wing? If anything, they're way heavier on the right wing as opposed to the left wing. Unlike most teams, the right side of their offense is pretty solid. You got Tyler Toffoli over there, Andrew Mangiapane, Blake Coleman. Those are 3 good right wingers, and true right wingers at that. On the left side, Hoobs is by and large
pretty much alone.
Just the best
He's
left
alone.
winger on that team.
Yeah. The weirdest thing about this, Daryl Sutter just as a strange dude, is I think it was right around when they got Nick Ritchie. Nick Ritchie, of all people, that kind of spurred Sutter to be like, okay, I guess now we can put Huberdeau back at left wing. It was Nick Ritchie. Those are the types of players that Daryl Sutter really likes. So that's saying something. So Brad Treliving already got, mutually agreed to leave the team, and Daryl Sutter remains for another season. So I don't know. If he keeps Huberdeau on his left side and gives him some sort of consistency with his line mates, I think he is that 70-plus point pace player that he showed to close out the year. Outside of that 40-point pace that he was putting together at right wing. And that would be acceptable from Huberdeau, especially in the system that he's in, the defensively first-minded whatever the hell. And while he's on the left wing for a while, playing, just under a point per game, I would expect, he'll probably stay there. His line will probably stick together. He'll probably be able to build some chemistry. And, the power play might have a little more efficiency. And I think he might be able to bring back his status as an elite playmaker, because like Toffoli and Lindholm seem like guys that can easily put up 30 to 35. And then that's almost like, what did he have? He had like 87 assists his last year in Florida. So right there, if like he assists on, 2/3 of those, you're looking at what, 40 assists just from those two players. He can find another 20 assists somewhere.
And that's what he had all season this year, was 40 assists.
That's brutal. I don't think he's anywhere near the 100-point range. This is something we're echoing that we said in the preseason. That was Florida's offense first system. But I think he can flirt with point per game next year. Giving him a little bit more time to get his feet wet with the system, with the players, with the town, with the country, with everything that's brand new for him, might be able to help him just feel a little more at home. And hopefully he can find some common ground with Daryl Sutter, I guess. Like, I don't know. I don't like him as a coach there for fantasy. It's just from a fantasy perspective, Daryl Sutter is brutal. Unless you're like really into hits, there's no reason Daryl Sutter is a good fantasy coach. But that's my take on Huberdeau. I think next year there's going to be a bounce back. His ADP should take a hit and hopefully reflect where he will wind up next year at the end of the season versus where he was, which I think was what that was a bit of a problem that we had this year. So, yeah, that's it. That's what I got on Huberdeau here.
So I think it would be, pertinent to kind of stay in Calgary. Might as well knock these crap Calgary guys out of the way. But unfortunately, it's Mackenzie Weegar. We're going to talk about Mackie Weeks, and you all know how I feel about Mackie Weeks. I love him. He's a fan favorite of mine. So last year he was, I took a lot of these. The direction I took a lot of my notes here, TJ, I looked at where these players were drafted last year and where I think they could possibly go this upcoming season. Now, just to knock that out real quick, what do you think about Hoobs? Like
Huberdeau?
Yeah.
Jesus.
How much do you think he's going to drop from where he was last year?
I think he's going to drop violently. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are salty and are not going to be quiet about how salty they are. I mean, anybody that owned Huberdeau, Raj is one of those people, and he's mentioned it, a bunch of times, like how mad and jaded he is now on Huberdeau. So I think he falls easily another 5 rounds, probably 6 rounds. So the only people that are going to be drafting him in the 5th and 6th rounds are people that are convinced that a bounce back is coming. But I think the ceiling has taken a huge hit going to Calgary to the point where we're not getting anywhere near like even 3rd round value. So I don't know. I guess I'd safely put him in like the 6th round, 5th, 6th round is where, I think optimistic people are going to take him, and his ADP average position might be in the 7th.
So I think the same thing is going to happen with Weegar. So he was drafted 105th overall last year, and I'm taking these out of our drafts. So every year, as you guys know, we do a ton of mock drafts and everything like that. And what that really does for us is it'll give us an idea of, we have our own ADP to go on.
Yeah.
We don't have to use, ESPN and Yahoo's. We have our own 5-hole ADP. So Weegar was drafted 105th overall. This year, he didn't get any of the, he only had, 31 points all year long, only 4 goals. The biggest, outlier that I saw here. Now, Mackenzie Weegar he's always going to be decent on blocks and hits. So at least you had that. And he did start turning it on towards the end of the year. But he only had 3 power play points, none of which were goals, all of them on the assist. That is rough. And in all honesty, the Flames have successfully just totally screwed over, 2 of my favorite Florida Panthers in Huberdeau and Weegar. But I that's what I kind of put it down to. I think that's the most feasible metric I could find as to why Weegar fell off a cliff this year. Don't know what else to attribute it to, but it's got to be that. I mean, Calgary was second in the league this year on shots on goal, but second to last in, shooting percentage. So they're peppering the damn net, but they're taking crap shots if you're watching a lot of these games. Now, they did also give up the third most shots on goal against in the entire league. So that's telling me, they're chasing the puck more than they should be. They're going to be hitting a lot more than a lot of teams because they're constantly playing defense. And what these shots are doing, the shots on goal that they're taking, they're not getting back and keeping in the offensive zone. So you are going to have a Mackenzie Weegar who is going to be high on hits and blocks. But for me, it all comes down to the high danger chances. They had amongst the league's highest amount of high danger chances and converted, right in the middle, 10.8%. That's less than the St. Louis Blues, who were just god-awful this year. And don't get me wrong, you and I both love the idea of taking a ton of shots, and I'm all for it, but, you gotta connect on these high-danger chances. They also had a power play percentage that was under 20%. And a player like Huberdeau, who is supposed to be a power play guru, So, what I do know about Mackie Weegs is he's, next year he's going to be getting paid like a number 1 defenseman. But he hasn't looked like one since arriving in Calgary. You got Rasmus Andersson, who is he's looked, at least to me, like the best all-around defenseman. You got Noah friggin' Hannafin, looking like a better power play option than Mackie Weegs. And like you said, with their GM getting fired, hopefully, some things move in the right direction. His contract was about to expire, so they were either going to sign him to another contract or it was going to be done. And with the way this season went, I think it was pretty obvious. But like you said, it's going to come down to if Sutter can change his coaching style. He goes from being coach of the year one year to this the next. So in all honesty, I put a lot of the onus on this power play. If Mackie Weegs can't get that top power play, then I don't really know what to expect. I do think that he's going to drop drastically in next year's draft. I mean, I'm thinking, it'll be double digits, I'm thinking sure. 11th, 12th round, somewhere like that is where I'm kind of projecting Mackenzie Weegar. I think that's a safe spot just because you have no idea what's going on with that power play and where he's going to be on it. Now, he will get some power play time, don't get me wrong, but if it's on the first power play, that's great. If it's not, then you're kind of screwed.
He's been fairly successful without the power play. I'm looking at his 2021 season where he put up a 55-point pace in 54 games. And a lot of that was on the back of the assists. And I feel like that is the stat that I see him.
Florida.
Yeah, where there's a lot more goals
high-powered
and a super high-powered offense where, run it up 6 goals because Bobrovsky's going to give up 5. That's how we win games. Calgary, his season in Calgary just there weren't as many assists to go around. I feel like if the team gets more offensive next year, Weegar should, be one of those boats that what do they say? A rising tide, He should see that. And he wasn't so like, a 31-point pace versus a 45-point pace. It's no joke which one's better. And it's, it's no surprise that we'd rather have the 45-point pace. But, I think it was the assists. And without people scoring goals, there's not going to be assists to go around. And that's just the logic behind it. So I hope that he can get those assists back. Yeah, and then the shooting percentage, like he was benefiting from a really inflated shooting percentage over the last 4 years. In Florida, 9.1 is 1 year he had, and 5.9, which is pretty high for a defenseman. And this year it was 2.5. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but mostly it's just the assists, like 27 assists this year.
Yeah, but I don't think that he's the 2.5 either. Like, I'm not saying that he's a 9.1, but he's not a 2.5 either.
And I'm hoping that, he gets the, as I was hoping for Huberdeau, I'm hoping that he also, is one more year comfortable to the team and to the town and to the country even. Like that's a big change. You're going from friggin' Sunrise, Florida to Calgary, south of the United States where it's warm and shit. And then you're up in Calgary. Big change.
Sounds unpleasant.
Change. So I'm going to talk about Aaron Ekblad now, who was Weegar's defense partner the year prior. And I think there's a lot riding on that, just the change there. Not having Weegar there to be that defensive presence behind him, forcing him into the role of that defensive presence behind now Montour and Forsling, who, as you'll get into a little bit later, they stole the spotlight. For sure. I mean, Montour is breaking defenseman records for the Florida Panthers. And Aaron Ekblad's just been
crazy.
I've been on his jock for years, and I think this might be the year I get off of it. He's injured right now during the playoffs. And, anyway, ADP of 34.4, and he gave us a 44-point pace. And that's coming off a 77-point pace. And for 4 years in a row, he has been injury prone. He's a liability. And like I said, he's hurt right now. He was a game-time decision yesterday, did not play, and still hurt. And he's been overshadowed by Montour and Forsling.
Down to dance.
So what happened? What happened to Ekblad? The power play points stayed about the same. Is a 27 power play point pace last year. That turned into a 22-point power play point pace. But that's not enough to excuse a 33-point drop in total pace. Goals last year was 20-goal pace. This year is a 16-goal pace. So we're missing like 4 goals and 5 power play points. And maybe one of those power play points was a goal. So it's hard to say, okay, that's 9 points for sure. Where you really notice the drop is his assists. There was that stretch, where was it? There was 18 games where all he had was 3 goals. Last year, he was on a 56 assist pace, and that cratered exactly in half. 28 assist pace this year. Where did they go? There's that 18-game stretch. I have it here, where Ekblad only recorded 3 goals. He lost top power play during that span. Without Weegar, he had to be that defensive guy. So the assists went to Forsling and Montour. There was a distinct drop in Aaron Ekblad's secondary assists, which typically are attributed to luck, but you also see a lot more of them with defensemen. His assists per 60 dropped from 1.1 per game, 1.1 per 60, to 0.3. That's a drop-off of 73%, which would account for all of those quote-unquote missing assists. And you draw that out in a normal year, and he's looking at a 36 assist total on the year. And that's a little bit closer to where he was the year prior, being fair, all the way through. Last year, he saw a really big jump in secondary assists. So I don't know that last year is really the measuring stick that we should be using. 77-point pace shouldn't be the new normal for Ekblad, because if you look under the hood of his stats last year, there were some big red flags that, year over year, you wouldn't be able to bet on for sustainability. Huge drop in all nice goals, 4 per 60 for Ekblad too. So not only was his IPP down 20%, but the amount of goals that there was to get in on was down 23%. And it's just really, it's starting to salt the wound here. Everything's just expounding. His assists, secondary assists dropped. IPP dropped. The amount of goals on the ice dropped. So it's like, I don't know. It's almost like this perfect storm for him, where everything went bad. He was also starting in the defensive zone a fair bit more this year. Last year it was 55% in the offensive zone. This year it dropped to 47% in the offensive zone. So he was being deployed a bit more defensively. And one would think without Weegar, he would be the only. Without Weegar, you have Forsling and Montour, who, not to sell them short or anything, but if they have one dimension, it's offense. And Ekblad can be your more defensive guy. And, Paul Maurice is going to look at those guys for offense and Ekblad for the bigger role, the Charlie McAvoy role of old. And mostly what I think was playing into this disappointing year was just the high expectations that we had off of his 77-point pace. He saw a bunch of career highs in really volatile stats. The on-ice shooting percentage, IPP, it was a Florida team that was unstoppable offensively. The offense as a whole was down 15%. Their power play was down 7%. So it's just across the board bad luck this year while having our expectations too high on an unsustainably high year last year. So it's just really bad for expectations. And I fell for it too. Right now we have the benefit of hindsight, which, looking at the preseason, I'll be the first to say I was very high on Ekblad. If we go back to the defenseman rankings, pretty sure I had him well within my top 10, probably within my top 5.
That would be an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah. So, with all of that to go with, our expectations our bar was set a little bit too high for Ekblad, and then he just fell short. So he came from an unsustainably hot year to him being a buy low all year. And if you bought, he just stayed low. And then you got the emergence of Montour and Forsling as offensive threats, and they kind of usurped and repurposed Ekblad's role on the team. The Florida Brass didn't need to put Ekblad in offensive roles when there were two weapons there with him. And the void, left by Weegar defensively needed to be filled by someone. Ekblad made the most sense. So, I see it from Paul Maurice's point of view, and with the benefit of hindsight that we do have, it starts to make sense a little bit. So I think somebody like Ekblad going into next year, if this team looks the same, I will probably be shaving off a fair bit of those points. And Jesus, that 2 defenseman power play is just so frustrating. So, as much as it pains me to say, but I hope they go to 1, and maybe it's just Montour. So I don't know. So that's my top to bottom on Aaron Ekblad. I think next year is going to be maybe in the 50-point range. I think 70 points is probably something that would be a bit unfair. And when I say 50 points, we have to put pace behind it because Ekblad has shown that he's going to get hurt. He's going to get hurt and just can't stay healthy for a full season. So buyer beware.
So a big part of what you talked about there was, what I took from that was the emergence of Gustav Forsling and Brandon Montour. Brandon Montour scored almost double the points that Aaron Ekblad did.
Yeah.
Last year he was drafted 247th overall in our drafts. I'm also sure that he didn't get drafted in a bunch of drafts. You know what I mean?
247.
In like your home leagues
deep.
And stuff like that. He was a player that you were picking up off the waiver wire, streaming by chance. And if you did draft him, you drafted him as like your 3rd or 4th defenseman, a guy that you were, you're willing to drop. And that was for good reason. His previous, high for points in general was the season prior. But at the same time, I put it as Aaron Ekblad, scored a bunch of points that season because he's good and they did really well. Montour to me scored a bunch of points because they were good, not because he was good. Now, was he worth, streaming or picking up for a couple of games? Yeah, absolutely. But he had career highs in a ton of shit this year.
A ton of them.
He had career highs in goals with 16. He doubled his career high in assists with 57. He had 33 power play points, also career high.
He tripled his previous high, almost tripled.
And then one thing that you can look at, though, at the same time is what he did get, as you said, was the power play. But on top of that, he had 6 more minutes time on ice than he did the previous season. He had career high in time on ice. And just like Aaron Ekblad, on average, he was shooting on goal 3 times per game. Now, I love that. I do. I love that. Now, he's okay on hits and blocks, but, dude, it's the power play. It was the, putting him into an offensive role. When I started out looking and, when I started out just thinking about this, for each of these players, I kind of thought about what I thought the reason was. And I was kind of at a loss until I looked at those numbers. But it's that extended power play one time. It's just odd that it seemed like it happened out of nowhere, but it coalesced at the same time as Ekblad seemed to be taking a step back. Now, at the same time, had Mackenzie Weegar been there this year, I think that would be him right now instead of Montour. But with the absence of Mackenzie Weegar, it makes sense now that you look at it that Brandon Montour stepped into that role. Now, the question is, where in the world is he going to get drafted next year? This seems like, almost seems like a fucking damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, I will say that he's going to be drafted higher than the 18th round, which is where he was drafted this past season.
Yeah, he'll definitely go
he will be drafted. He won't be left off of your draft, most likely. But at the same time, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know that I have a projection for you, TJ. I don't. I have no idea where he's going to go other than to say it's going to be higher than the 18th round. Like, I'm worried to draft
minutes. Do you see that?
What?
107 penalty minutes, too. Like, he's just a banger stud all over the place.
Oh, he played out of his mind. Along with, like I said, he had, more than a hit per game, more than a block per game. He's doing it all out there. Had a ton of shots, had a ton of minutes. Like you said, the PIMS, which is also his, double his career high on PIMS. But, dude, where do you possibly think he's going to go? I almost put him in around the same spot that maybe I put Weegar. I'm thinking maybe 12th round. But the whole thing is, so you're drafting a guy that had 73 points last year in the 12th round because I am so damn afraid of drafting him like a 73-point defenseman.
I think that's where he's going to get drafted.
Scares the shit out of me.
I think that is exactly where he's going to get drafted. He'll probably get drafted where Ekblad was getting drafted.
In the fifth, sixth round?
Fourth, fifth round, yeah. I could see it. I could 100% people buying into this. And
I can't do it. I can't bring myself to draft Brandon Montour in the 5th round.
The hardest part of this is like there's a lot of stats here that I'd be able to buy into. His IPP is right there in line. Power play IPP in line. Secondary assist in line. Offensive zone starts in line. Like a lot of,
they're all super positive. I'll give you that. They're all super positive, and they have been the past 3 years. The whole thing is, all of those stats that you're bringing up right now have been pretty steady and not going up, not going down, but just steady for the past 3 seasons. What changed was the power play and the time on ice.
So everything is going to rest on that. Like 33 points, if they evaporate into a second power play role like he had been the previous 3 years, 8 power play points, 1 power play point, 2 power play points. That's what, 11 through 3 years divided by 3. So like right around 3.7. So let's call it 4 power play point average. If he loses that power play and loses 29 power play points, we're talking, this is a completely different look for him. So if he's top power play, there's a lot that you could say that he's got like 60-point upside and easily he could surpass that. But 60 feels conservatively optimistic. And again, rests entirely on whether or not he gets top power play.
Mm-hmm. So
I don't know. You know, does he get drafted there? Does somebody take that chance and get rewarded, or does somebody take that chance and get burned? And that's, you know, we'll wait till we see preseason lines and stuff. But looking at a year like this, if you're Coach Paul Maurice, there is zero reason to say, no, I'm not giving him the first crack at it. So it's all going to be on Montour. If that magic can stick around, if he can have, you know, 100 plus point Matthew Tkachuk feeding him pucks, and, you know, the team sticks together for the most part and continues their offensive prowess, there's no reason to say he can't be 60, 65 plus. Early take, I'm sure of it, but we'll see if it burns me. All right, I'll go on to Erik Karlsson, who is the complete flip side from Huberdeau and Ekblad, the two players I've been talking about so far. Karlsson was maybe the least disappointing player of the year. The first 100-point defenseman since Brian Leetch in 91-92. He had an ADP of 133.5, and he scored over 100 points as a defenseman. I think, first of all, we need to, you know, have a collective round of applause for Karlsson, because he strung together his first healthy season in close to a decade. 2015-16 was the last time he played 82 games. There's a bunch of red flags. It's wet blanket time. Shooting percentage is double his average, so that's bad for his chances at repeating a 25-goal season.
He's always 76, been somewhat high, though, on shooting percentage.
But 25 goals as a defenseman, like I remember this with, you know, Jacob Chychrun had 20 goals that time. Darnell Nurse did, and then what happened to those guys the next year? They didn't have those goals. So shooting percentage is super, super volatile, especially for a defenseman on a bad team. But then again, I guess you could say that he's got a bigger role to play, and he is the guy.
Gone.
Brent Burns is gone. Timo Meier is gone. Who's the guy? It's Erik Karlsson.
Someone's got to shoot. Someone has got to score, TJ.
Someone's
got to score goals.
I hate it. 76 assists is a career high. He had a 67% IPP. And in recent years, specifically in San Jose, his IPP is up 27%. It used to be, well, his average was 49 and change. It's up to 67%. And that makes a ton of sense, because Karlsson was on the ice for 150 goals that San Jose scored. Also a career high for him, for anybody that's into that kind of stat. San Jose scored 233 all season. So Karlsson was on the ice for 64% of all of San Jose's goals. So yes, when this might be the first case where I can say, yes, somebody has to score. And, you know, maybe it's Erik Karlsson. It used to be Jack Eichel in Buffalo, but now here he is. 233 goals for the San Jose Sharks all season, and he factored into 101 of those. Of the 150 that I was on the ice for. So right there, that's how you determine IPP. How many goals you're on the ice for, how many points you have. His time on ice went up 6%. He's always super high, so I just don't see that affecting his totals too much. San Jose's goals for per game, that's pretty steady. It was, 2.85 the 4 years prior. Now it's 2.84. So there's not a ton. Honestly, there's nothing there. They didn't score more goals. They barely scored less. It could be because Brent Burns is out of the picture. 27 power play points this year, his highest since 2014-15. His power play percentage jumped up as a result of Brent Burns being out of the picture. And his shooting percentage went up 46% higher than his career average, which is probably where those 25 goals came from. The 76 assists, that's where I'm trying to find the discrepancies. It's a career high. His secondary assist percentage isn't high, but he has a very concerning on-ice shooting percentage. It's not enough to explain the 41% increase in assists compared to his averages in San Jose, but it's still it plays into it. And then again, we're talking about how often he was on the ice for their goals, and over close to half of the goals he had a part of all of San Jose. So he certainly was a catalyst for a ton of it. The amount of minutes he played, how well he was passing. How many times did we see highlight reel moves from Erik Karlsson where he was deking out somebody, going through somebody's legs, and just making a mess of people, collecting ankles all season. And his durability this year, huge. It all played a part into one of the best seasons we've seen from defensemen in 30 years. Is it going to happen again next year, Zach?
No,
likely not.
No, it's not. He's not going to be. Hot take: he is not going to be 100-point defenseman next year. He's going to be 33. He's going to be 33 years old. You understand that, right?
I'm going to be 33 in a couple weeks. I couldn't even get 1 point as a defenseman in the NHL. Is this season going to be a catfish, convincing us that Karlsson isn't injury prone, as he's been every year outside of this one? Probably.
I mean, he hasn't played 82 games since he was in Ottawa. Like, it's been a long time. And, as far as the 101 points he scored this year, that's more than the previous 3 seasons combined.
Yeah.
Combined. With only, on average 30 more games than he usually plays. So this makes no freaking sense. On top of the fact that look at that lineup that they have. They're not a good looking team. No offense to anybody, but San Jose is not a team that has,
where are you going to find 75 assists next year? Really?
Who is going to be scoring these goals? Kevin LeBanc? Tomas Hertl is going to be like their new offensive threat? I don't fucking think so.
Oscar Lindblom.
I just don't see it. I just don't. It's so hard for me to understand how this could possibly work out again. Like, I get that, he's on the ice all the time for when they're scoring goals and stuff like that. And that, I dig that stat, and I'll give it to you. But I cannot see it. I can't see it. I'm not even interested in, that's the thing. He is going to get drafted so much higher than he did last year. So much higher. And it ain't going to be by me.
His typical status as somebody that's injury prone is a reason that he was such a value this year, is because people took that into account. That's kind of baked into who Erik Karlsson is. He is injury prone. And he was every single year leading up to this one. And this is what's going to happen. Like, you see guys like, Chris Letang put together a full season. This year, Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby both played full seasons. And you don't see that typically. And
they didn't make the playoffs. How'd that work out?
Tristan Jarry's to blame.
Agreed.
At the draft table, those things are taken into account. How many games am I going to get out of this guy this year? Yeah, I'll get elite point per game pace, but how many games am I going to get that point per game pace? And that is something that Erik Karlsson has conditioned us to believe, is that we're going to get him for 60 games. So that's why he was so low. And now that he's put together a full season, he's broken records. Well, not broken records, but just reminded us how dominant he is and done something that no defenseman has done in the past 30 years. He's going to get overdrafted. And it just seems like it would be perfect poetry that next year he gets injured again. He just reminds people why he was such a value last year. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen. It just seems like something that would happen. Does he get traded? Is he on San Jose next year? That's something that nobody's talking about at this point. We want Erik Karlsson on our fantasy teams next year, but is he still in San Jose? Is he still the biggest fish in one of the smallest ponds?
Yeah, I'm not saying that I wouldn't draft him or I wouldn't want him on my team. It's just that I don't think that I would draft him where other people are gonna.
Yeah. So as a result, he's probably not going to be on either of our teams. It's just, other people are going to take him first. Maybe
at the same time, what team? Who are they going to trade him to? Man's making $11.5 million a year. You better score 101 points at that amount. Seriously.
What's San Jose's window? If they retain 50% on it, can they still? How many years he got left?
I mean, 5, that's what 6? That's what they did with the Meyer trade.
So there you go. Like,
They
is that
retained
something
half
that
of his salary, but
Mike
Meyer's
Grier
going
is
to have
gonna
to get
want-
paid by someone.
he wants something from him? All right, let's get back to Karlsson here. His stats: he was first amongst defensemen in stretch pass attempts, and he was fourth in completed stretch passes, which is great for breaking out. It's great for his assist totals. And last year, he was 91st in attempts and 108th in completed stretch passes. So it was a big improvement in those two stat categories that helped him accumulate 76 assists this year. And you rank him against D-men with 900 or more minutes at 5-on-5. I did that number just because I wanted to get the Brennan Smiths and the Josh Mansons and these like one-game wonders who scored 2 points and their per 60s are just out the ass. So I did 900 minutes at 5-on-5. Erik Karlsson is second in goals per 60, first in assists per 60, first in primary assists per 60, third in secondary assists, first in IPP, a sustainability stat that we're going to look at, 33rd in shots on goal, third in shooting percentage. Vince Dunn is number one. A little bit of a side eye there. Third in scoring chances for. You got Hamilton and Yossi, 1 and 2 there. 15th in individual high danger chances for. Second in rush attempts. Again, Dougie Hamilton is first. Fourth in takeaways per 60, which is just good for possession and, having the puck. Fifth in on-ice shooting percentage. Looking at Vince Dunn again, because he's first. Two stats you probably don't want to be first in. Vince Dunn is first in. Fourth in offensive zone starts, and fifth in offensive zone starts percentage, and 11th in power play points. So a big part of this is just that not many folks take into consideration. Like he was really, really, really good this year, and not a lot of it is just like unsustainable. But to say he's going to score 100 points again, that's ridiculous. I don't know. Show me one person that thought that was going to happen this year. I would think it would be a bit insane to predict him for 100 points, but I think he can flirt with point per game again, relative to however many games he does wind up getting. You see he still has it. He's making highlight reel plays. How many times do we see him breaking ankles? A ton. So I do think he's going to be somewhere like upwards of 65 points. Easy. I think that's an easy thing to say, especially after a 100-point year. I just don't think he's going to be that dominant, and he's not going to be that much of a value because of something you and I have been talking about all this whole time. He's going to get drafted a lot higher next year. So the value is going to take a dip, and the risk is going to still be there. So I don't know.
I mean, his stats this year put him in the first or second round. Easy.
They would. Yeah. I remember those days.
If you're drafting him like he played last year, that's first or second round. More likely first. But it's hard for me to say those words out loud.
Yeah. And there's another guy who's on your docket, Tage Thompson.
Well, we're not there. We're not there yet. See,
I know we're
Tage
not there
Thompson,
yet. But
I friggin' believe in, though. I believe
are
in
we? Is Tage Thompson a first-round pick?
I think
he's got to be top 3 rounds.
Yes, easy top 3 rounds. I don't remember where I projected him, but I think it was in the. I would feel more comfortable drafting him in the second round, but I digress. Let's finish these D-men up here. Let's finish these D-men. Which brings me to Dougie Hamilton. So I got Dougie Hamilton next. He's our last defenseman that we have on our list as just these, oddities. Now, I don't know if I see this as much of an oddity as it just makes sense with the overall how the Devils played. He was drafted 60th overall last year. So as the way I see it, he's kind of right on time with, draft and how he played. Now, I do think that, he could get drafted maybe a round higher or 2 rounds higher. I would say 4th or 5th round, I think makes a lot of sense for me as to where you draft him next year. And I do believe this, and it's because I believe in the young talent in the Devils. So can this happen again? Yes, I honestly do think that it can. It's the surging players, like I said, around him that I think make all the difference. Dougie is good and all, but, it's Hughes, it's Heischer, it's Palat, all these players that they have locked into long contracts The question will be, what will the Devils do with the apparent, turnover that they're about to have, like big time. 11 players are going to be either RFAs or UFAs after this season. And Dawson Mercer, a guy that we both love, he's going to be right around the corner too next year in that same boat. So we're going to have to worry, about next year, but it's this year that's going to be right on the horizon. And some of these players, they play a big role. Players that I don't expect back are, Damon Severson, Jesper Bratt. I don't think that he's going to be back, and it sucks to lose Jesper Bratt and Damon Severson.
No, don't say that.
I feel like they're going to, and I'll tell you why. Because I think it's going to take too much money to re-sign them, considering that they've got to pay Meyer. They gave up too much money, and too much, between picks and players and everything like that. They gave up too much money. They just gave up too much to not re-sign him and only have him as, a loan for this season. But I mean, Tomas Tatar, Erik Karlsson, you guys are out of here. Like, Erik Karlsson, you can definitely fucking go. Tomas Tatar, I like you, but I'm not gonna be able to do it. Guys that I do think that they're gonna re-sign and really need to try, Igor Sharangovich. I don't think that cheap. That's what I have down here. I don't think that he's going to bolster too much money to re-sign him. So I think that one's a good one, good role player. But like I said, Timo Meier, they've got to figure out a way to do it. So that's why I think that your Jesper Bratts of the world and your Seversons of the world aren't going to get re-signed, because that money's got to go somewhere. And the answer is it's got to go to Timo Meier. They traded 4 players for him, 3 draft picks, so they've got to figure it out. They've already put in too many eggs into that basket, the way I see it. In all honesty, the moral of the story is that the Devils have taken a huge offensive leap, like I said, and it's in part to those players that I named before. Jack Hughes, who's turning into a superstar. If they keep up the offensive, the offense like they have, then Dougie's going to continue to reap the benefits. But as far as, a bunch of the offensive metrics, New Jersey is only middle of the pack. That's the scary part.
For a long time, they were leading the league in expected goals, which just means that they were the most dangerous, or at least the team that was getting to the most dangerous places. And that is a huge stat. That's good, especially for their long-term outlook. If they can keep that going.
So if they keep that going and they get better than a lot of middle of the pack as they ended up at the end of the year, that's going to be good things. Good things for Dougie, because he is 100% going to be on that number 1 power play. As long as he is playing, he's going to be on that number 1 power play. And with, Meier being up there, Jack Hughes just, being in the league another year, he's going to keep getting better. Jack Hughes is freaking good. He is good. Now, I'm not saying that, you're going to draft Dougie Hamilton in the 2nd round or anything. But, he went at the very end of the 5th round last year. So I could even see as high as the 3rd for me. Like, I think, it's more feasible to put him in the 4th round. That's where I would feel more comfortable drafting him. But, I mean, he played like if he's your first or second best defenseman, that's super feasible for me. And like I said, I put this all to, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that Hamilton did this. It's all because of those other players. Like I said, Dougie's good, but like when you have these other players having breakout seasons like they have, when you have Bratt playing as well as he did, Sharangovich coming out of the woodwork, that's big. So I put this as, I'm not surprised at all by this one. This is one of the players that we actually have here that I'm not surprised.
And I think he could he could find himself inside the top 5 defensemen next year. I mean, the guys that immediately jump to mind are like Adam Fox, Cale Makar, Roman Josi, and that it feels like at least the Roman Yossi tier of it, like, feels like where Dougie Hamilton should be. So I could see him, if I wanted to spread it out, I could say confidently he is one of the top 7 defensemen. Obviously, I'd have to put pen to paper and figure it all out, but just thinking of it here, like, there's got to be players I'm forgetting about. But yeah, I think he could be right up there in that, like, tier 2, just outside the Adam Fox, Cale Makar kind of tier right there. I think it's makes sense, like you said. And the next guy I have here, like, also makes sense, and it's super easy. And this one, like, it's easily my shortest spiel. It's Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. 100 points for him this year, maybe the quietest 100-point season in recent memory. ADP of 140, and he had 53 power play points, which is more than half of his points. So, I mean, truly, the conversation should end there. That's where, 30 more power play points than his 65-point pace season last year. 29 more power play points than his previous best pace of 77 points. So, like, it just makes sense. He had 53 power play points. Playing with McDavid, playing with Draisaitl, who both set career highs. And I'm not trying to say Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is just riding coattails here. He had a good season in his own right, but when you add 53 power play points to any player's season, they are going to have probably a historic season.
Well, they did have a historic season, did they not?
All of them.
Am I correct?
All of them did.
They set a power play record, right?
They did. Like, they were the best power play since they've been recording the stat. Yeah, best power play. So, like, the repeatability of something that broke a record is probably not good. To say that Edmonton's power play is going to be bad next year, that's not a good bet either. So, I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins still plays extremely well next year. Is he going to get 53 power play points? Is that going to carry him to another 100-point season? I'm probably betting against that, but it's just hard to bet against anything that plays with Connor McDavid that much. And again, like, I don't want to say that he's just coattail riding. That's not who RNH is. But when you look at his stats, even the surface stats, he shot at 18% all year, which, easy career best of 15 power play goals, which beat his previous high of 9. And it's just pretty consistent across the board everywhere else. The goals, they jump off the page. Career high power play goals, as well as career high shooting percentage, 67 assists. You can attribute that to playing with McDavid, playing with Draisaitl, playing with all of these great players who had their own 6
for a full
in
year.
Edmonton. That's what happens. He's going to be playing with those guys again next year. So who knows what they have up their sleeves? Does McDavid break his own record next year? Probably. That's McDavid. So, like, is he going to have another season disguised as coattail riding next year? Probably. And I'm not saying it's, all against, like, all because of McDavid. RNH played well on his own. But when you play with players of that caliber, your season's going to be a bit inflated. Plain and simple. So it explains it. And, out of all of the 100-point scorers, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins' IPP is the lowest. Lower than Pettersson, lower than Karlsson, lower than every single other 100-point scorer this year. Kachuk, like, all of them. So that there's the least amount of, like, red flags sustainability-wise there is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. But I just don't know if they're going to have the best power play in the world ever next year, and if they continue that. So that's where I'm at. I think he's probably like a 85-ish, 90-point player. 100 points, I don't know. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just it's hard to bet on.
I'll give you that, but you know how much I like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
Oh, yeah.
Guy. In fact, I was a little upset that you stole him from me when we were drafting these players, because that's how TJ and I do this. We'll have, like, a list, and then we have a draft of who we want to take and who we don't want to take. And, I mean, I think we probably all would have been fine with taking any of these players, but I love Nugent-Hopkins, and TJ stole him from me. It's pretty rude.
Yep.
But it is what it is. You did. It was a snipe. As you actually do often in actual drafts.
All right, who's your next guy?
Tage Titties. Tage Thompson.
Yeah.
Tage Thompson, drafted 88th overall. I got him going in the second round. I mean, I don't think he's a first rounder. Like, you asked that question. I don't have him going in the first round. I'm not willing to take him in the first round. I'd feel much more comfortable taking him in the third round, but I think that he won't be there in the third round if that's where I try to draft him. So I have him projected in the second round this year. Straight down the middle, boy. 47 goals, 47 assists. Craziness. And this isn't one of those somebody's got to score anymore because, well, Buffalo did that all together.
They're getting good.
That's what happens when you draft high in the first round year after year after year. At some point in time, you better become good.
Take notes, Danny Briere.
I will take it to their power play actually started showing up this year. For years and years, they had an awful power play. He had 34 power play points this year, and 20 of those 47 assists, or 20 of those 47 goals, were on the power play. That's a lot. Now, I am worried about that stat for sure. But this guy, he's a certifiable BFG that unfortunately doesn't hit, but he big as fuck. But if you're going to score 94 points, don't bother, I guess. If you're going to score 94 points for me, you don't have to hit. But this was a breakout in the biggest way. It's a nearly 30-point jump from last season. And don't get it twisted. Buffalo did have a great year all around. But it's Tage Thompson that prompted this revival, if you will. It is him. He is he is what stirs the pot. And what's really great is they have him and the offensive core of their team, locked up to term. They do need to, sign their entire defense pretty much, except for Dahlin, who they clearly do need to hold on to. But I mean, you're looking at Jeff Skinner. He is signed through 26-27. You're looking at these guys, Alex Tuck, who we love. He's signed for another 4 years. Olofsson is going to be guaranteed to be there next year. So they're kind of in a run-it-back situation. And even a lot of their young guys, you're looking at Dylan Cousins, who just got paid, but he's going to be around for a long time. But Peyton Krebs, Peterka, these are guys that are still on ELCs. Jack Quinn, still on an ELC. Like, they're going to have money to move around, which, don't get me wrong, they're going to have to spend, some of that on defense coming up here. But, man, they're actually looking real good money-wise. So they're going to be able to bring in, what
Erik
I would
Karlsson.
think would be a high-level free agent this year.
Or a 50% retained Erik Karlsson. Who knows?
Oh, but then Dahlin's going to get screwed on that power play. How are you going to feel about that?
No, I don't think he will.
You think they'd put him on the second? You think they'd put Erik Karlsson on the second power play? I would not want them to get, an aging Erik Karlsson. I don't know where I want Erik Karlsson to go, but I hope it's not Buffalo.
They just need
Buffalo
like
has
Dillon.
too much going on for them as far as young defensemen and everything like that.
Yeah.
Owen Power. I love me some Owen Power.
They need like just 5 Ryan Lindgrens. That's what they need to go out and get. Well, actually, they have Owen Power on an ELC, so I guess there's 2. You only need 4 Ryan Lindgrens. Figure it out. They'll get it.
But like you said, you said Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was your shortest one. Tage Thompson is the one that I wrote the least about, just because, again, when you're looking at the way that they play their games, how big of a part he is to that offense, it makes sense when you're watching those games. You look at those numbers
wizard.
And it's believable.
He is so good too. When you watch him play, like the fact that he can move his body the way that he does, as big as he is, stick handling like crazy, just weaving in and out of players. Like, he's a hard worker too. Like, not a single one of those points did he not earn. Every single one of them, he just, man, he is a hard worker and he's good at it. And he came out of nowhere. Fantastic pickup. I think that was the Ryan O'Reilly trade.
He backed up a 15% shooting percentage last year with 15.9 this year. Is that just what he is? That's
yeah, I think question. So. Yeah, I think he is. Yep. Yeah, I'm there with that. Tage Thompson, he's going to be a lock. I feel like he's not going to live up to a second round potential. But again, I also didn't predict this 90-plus point year that he had this year. So I think there's more in the chamber for him. All right, I got a goalie here, Jacob Markstrom. Not to pick on the Flames too much, but man, Jacob Markstrom, you pissed off a lot of people. ADP of 30.6, and you had the fourth worst goal saved above average. Part of me wants to chalk this up to, like, last year we were like, okay, scoring's up in the NHL. I don't think it's going to get any higher. It did. There were so many more goals scored this year than any other year. So actually, I think since like 1992, this has been just an impressive year all around. And when you have a high scoring league like that, goalies see the other side of it, where that means the most goals have been allowed this year since 1992. And that's bad for goalies. Jacob Markstrom definitely contributed to that a little bit. There's not a lot of that like sticks out. He wasn't seeing more high danger chances per 60 than any other team or any other goalie. Shot distance was middle of the pack. Expected goals against per 60, middle of the pack. He saw the 8th fewest shots against per 60. Amongst goalies that were playing 200 or more minutes. He had a good penalty kill save percentage. Earlier in the year, I read an article on Jacob Markstrom's struggles, and, they said that the Flames were giving up a ton of odd man rushes. I think it was Mike McKenna. He wrote an article for Daily Faceoff about Jacob Markstrom, and just saying, like, his technique's a little bit off. He's trying a little too hard. He's kind of in his own head. And it's just a bunch of that psychological stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, no matter how far you dig into natural stat trick. And you can't find that psychological stuff. So I wonder if it was just that. For a stretch there was, and our Flames fans, they'll definitely attest to this, but there was like a month or two, maybe even 3, where Markstrom would just allow a goal on the first shot, or like one of the first 5 shots every single game. And that was just a given that was going to happen. Calgary had the 4th best expected goals against on the season, so it's definitely not the defense. We can't point fingers that way. He went from Vezina caliber play to one of the worst in the league very quickly. And I think that's just a testament to the side of like erring on the side of reliability and drafting teams rather than drafting goalies, especially one-off. This is your 0G. The only guys that you can really count on are like Vasilevsky this year. Look at like Olmark was probably a 10th round pick for most leagues, and he wound up being the best. And Georgiev later. So again, 0G just seems like the way to go. For Markstrom, I do not have a prediction for next year because he's a goalie, and I don't want to do that. I hope the Flames get better as a whole, and I think as a result, Markstrom is going to see a better stats, but I can't promise you anything. Not with goalies, I can't. And that's it. That's all my guys. I think you got one goalie left.
Saving the best for last?
Yeah.
Is that what we're doing? We're saving the best for last? It's Filip Gustavsson. It's my guy. Dude, I have been. Like, you got to give me some props on that one. I've been on this Filip Gustavsson train for a while, and finally,
I think I bought you tickets to that train.
I love it.
I was right there when the old Magic was written.
I love it. And this is a player that went undrafted. These are the best ones, and that's why this is why you hate goalies, and this is why I love goalies, because this is what goalies are, except for Vasilevsky, who's always going to be towards the top. Very rarely are you going to draft Vasilevsky and be unhappy with where you drafted him. But you can find guys like this every year. It's great. I love it. I love me, finding goalies on the waiver wire and stuff like that. But this is a guy that went undrafted, like I said, and honestly, I'm thinking, he's, much more likely gonna go in I'll just say the goalie run. Is that a fair enough assessment?
He'll probably go where Fleury went last year, which I can look up right now, at least by Yahoo. Marc-Andre Fleury went at 58.3. So yeah, right in the chunk, like 5th round. And Yahoo is always a little more trigger happy than we are with goalies. So you could probably put him in like the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round, which would be the goalie run.
That's actually where I have him. I put on here, I projected 7th round. So I full well agree with you there. But dude, 931 save percentage this year, 2.1 goal against average, not a ton of roast beef sandwiches, which is great, but 22 wins, 9 losses. I feel like throughout the season, Gus has, proved himself to not only be the better goalie, but has also proven himself to be what should be, the future in Minnesota. For me, the fact is, that after trading Kaapo Kähkönen, the Wild needed to see what they had in Gustavsson. That's the thing. They needed to see. He's going to be an RFA after this season, so, it should get off the pot time. And, with Fleury only being signed through one more season, and an unrestricted free agent at that, that tells me that he's either going to retire or, be somewhere else for sure. If anything, I'd probably be trying to move Fleury around the trade deadline and go in a different direction if he's going to be a UFA. But I think they're going to look to sign Gus for a long-term deal. I'm thinking probably in the $3.5 million range, somewhere around that.
Get him for 3 or 4 years. Yeah,
I think that sounds like a good idea, and then possibly, like I said, look to
ride
move
Gus
Fleury
until Wallstead.
Agreed. It sounds like a great idea. Gustafsson's only 24 years old too, so he's a goalie that's kind of moving into his prime or getting there soon. It just makes too much sense not to do it as far as I see. All I know is that the Gustafsson Talbot trade is really looking like a big win for the Wild. They got a netminder of the future, and they dumped $3 million in salary for this past year, which helped them get to where they are now. Just flat out when it comes to fantasy, considering he wasn't even drafted. And he was a player that you likely picked up on the wire and just plugged in. He became one of those players that you find yourself not being able to drop. And that's, a great thing at times and an awful thing at the same time. If you're already full up on goalies and then you're like, well, I only got him for a spot start, but he keeps on winning. Somebody else ends up picking him up. So that does kind of suck all at the same time. But I've been a big fan of this guy throughout the season. I pushed for him to be picked up. So I'm definitely happy to see it work out. Even though, I, unlike most of you, love streaming goalies. I do. I love streaming goalies. You just watch that, find out who's starting that day, and you pick a goalie by the opponent and who's actually playing home games, away games. You take all that into consideration. That's why I love goalies. That's why you hate them.
Give me skaters, yeah. Skaters aren't getting me negative
volatile
points, so
it's great.
Yeah. Yep. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was fun getting back on the mic for this out of left field episode. I think me and Zach are going to go back into hibernation mode, probably enjoy the rest of the playoffs, and do our yearly hiatus where I will be scheduling a bunch of interviews for the Dynasty Series. So if there's anybody that you're particular, that you really want to see, usually we have, you can go back and look at our catalog from every year's Dynasty Series, but we'll have a bunch of prospect folks on, and we'll talk to them about the draft this year. So keep an eye out for that. I think we'll probably start that, maybe a month from now, leading up to the actual NHL draft, and then we'll get into our off-season content. But until then, we're going to be enjoying our break. You can still hit us up on Twitter at FHF Hockey. And until next time, whenever that may be, love yous.
Love yous.